Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so World of Warcraft's player base fell to pieces throughout Shadowlands, which felt pretty bad. Nathrya's strong start just whittled away, and by the end, rating statistics were actually at the lowest point in our dataset, which is since Nighthold. Yeah. Now, in every aspect then, Dragonflight's job is to stop the bleeding, to solidify the foundations, and to help WoW grow again. So, now that we've got the month 1 numbers, let's see how Vault of the Incarnates has performed, and also our sponsor, Squarespace.com/Bellular Gaming. A while back, I was adding a media section to our studio's website for The Pale Beyond. It was dead easy and super fast. A bunch of people have been clamoring for more of our game's music, and using Squarespace's simple tools were just that. They were simple. So I headed to the media page that I made last time, I created an audio block, dropped the music in, and voila, all was there. And with a flip of a switch, it was live. Hell, you can check out those tracks right now if you want. They do so much more, of course. Memberships, email lists, e-commerce, and lots of other fantastic features. I mean, last time I tested out their e-commerce, and it was just so easy to use. They can even hook into the fulfillment center we use, which automates a whole bunch of stuff. Crazy! So you can get started quick and easy today with Squarespace's award-winning templates and build your web presence at squarespace.com/Bellular Gaming, code Bellular Gaming for 10% off. And even before that, if you follow my link with a free trial, you can build your site and see how it works for you, and it'll be great. So, thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring, and let's go. Alright, number 1, data disclaimer. What data are we using? Really simple, it's Warcraft logs. Now, it's not perfect, but it is just about the best that we have. We're focusing on guild parses, so guild kills essentially, and that's really good because I think guilds are the stickiest part of World of Warcraft. They really are the beating heart of the game. And we've been using the same methodology since the start of Shadowlands, so no matter what, with the same methodology, we should be producing comparable numbers. Also, while Vault is close to, of course, the holidays, well, Castle Nathrya was essentially exactly the same timing. And that does allow for a apples-to-apples comparison between Shadowlands and Dragonflight's first raid tiers. Okay, let's begin. Normal, Heroic, and Mythic all, I think, hit slightly different types of players. We're going to look at all of them. And here you can see normal mode first and last boss kills within the first 4 weeks. Now, doing first and last boss is really important. First indicates that people actually, start the raid and have interest, and last, of course, indicates that they have finished the raid. So if first boss kills were massive, but last boss kills were really, really tiny, then that would indicate that loads of people start but don't stick around to the finish, which would be bad. And here is our first bit of good news. You can see 19,363 first boss kills, representing an over 55% increase from Sepulchre of the first ones. So that's good to see, more people coming in. And we then see a huge 254% increase in last boss kills. Now, we all remember how dire the Sepulchre of the first one completion rates were, and how it ended up becoming the most nerfed raid in the game's entire history. So, seeing that not repeat is certainly good. Now, these completion rates also do just represent some lower difficulty, but also, they represent more people achieving their goal within the game. Even if those people quit, they will have quit finishing the raid tier on a high, rather than quitting halfway through a raid tier. So, Vault of the Incarnate 60% is much better than Sepulchre's 26% completion rate within the first 4 weeks. Funny enough though, 60% is also around the same that Sanctum of Domination had in the same time frame. And that's not all that's similar. First and last boss kill numbers are highly similar to Sanctum. Much better than Sepulchre of the first ones, but sadly, yeah, still a tremendous drop from Castle Nathrya. A raid that, like Vault, dropped through Christmas and was the expansion's first. Vault of the Incarnates is, you're looking at in and around half of Nathrya for both the first and the last boss kills, guild kills, of course, on normal mode. And honestly, that does sting. I think Nathrya was a really strong raid, and I also think Vault is a very, very strong raid indeed. but the numbers are what they are. I'm certainly also reminded then of the numerous post-launch promotions that Blizzard have ran, like the trial, like giving away 30 days of game time with Dragonflight, and how Blizzard did not boast any sales figures for Dragonflight, whereas they did for Shadowlands, indicating, I think, that, while this is, in my opinion, a fantastic expansion, well, it's going to take a long time to undo the damage. And going back to the Legion and Battle for Azeroth expansions, one difference is clear. Legion rating appears to have grown throughout that expansion, while for BFA and Shadowlands, rating kind of diminished over time. WoW has become massively reliant on very large spikes around launch that then get slashed to pieces as the patches roll on. So compared to Legion, the very controversial BFA and especially Shadowlands have had longer patch cycles with less overall content. And I think that overall means then that if Dragonflight Season 2 and its raid, if they cannot break the cycle by either increasing their numbers over Season 1 or at least holding them vaguely steady, then really that will be very rough for this expansion's momentum. But I think we can take heart in something, because Dragonflight has a more Legion-like patch cycle. It really does, like in terms of the number of patches within the first year, so I think that'll help us out. Okay, that's normal mode done. It's our most accessible form of organized raiding, and unlike with Shadowlands, of course, there are so many other game features like Torghast and all the borrowed power that we don't even have to talk about, because raiding is as simple as getting a character, getting it gear, and doing the raid. So, let's look at Heroic. Well, everyone, Heroic is actually very similar to normal. It is an increase from Sepulchre to Vault. That takes us back to Sanctum of Domination-like numbers. Not that we should feel too happy about that, because even at the time, the numbers for Sanctum really did sting. Now, if we discount Sepulchre, the guild ahead of the curve rate for Vault is actually pretty on par with Shadowlands, coming in at and around 12%. That's slap bang in the middle of the 11% to 13% range seen within this time frame for Castle Nathria and Sanctum of Domination. So that's good to see. Again, all first 4 weeks. However, if we journey back to BFA and Legion, this Vault figure is still it's much lower, as you can see, than the guild clear rate that we saw back then, which was a combined average of 27%. So it's 12% versus 27%, indicating that within the first 4 weeks of a raid tier, significantly fewer heroic raiders are actually clearing the raid. Is that a bad thing? Well, based on these figures and the personal experience of myself, Matt, and Dakor, who is our resident cutting-edge mythic raider, we are finding that heroic end bosses over the past few expansions are quite tricky, and it seems like Blizzard wants to continue the trend of having them feel a bit like an early mythic boss within the first month of gearing. Now, Raszageth, as with other recent end bosses within the first month, does require the type of organization and coordination from a team that is similar to early mythic. And it actually, this is where the data comes in, has the kill count to match, with 1,703 guilds getting a kill. Around 1,000 more guilds managed to kill Mythic Primal Council within the same time frame. That's not Aranog, the first boss, that's Primal Council. So, interesting. Is it good? Is it bad? Should we expect a good heroic guild to have to overcome a mythic level encounter? Fewer will succeed, but maybe Blizzard is counting on that feeling like a fairly smooth transition up to mythic difficulty for those groups. If that is their logic, though, I would caution them by saying that for many people, if you have, say, a group of, like us, maybe 10, 11, 12, 13 people that just like to play together, and you're not really interested in expanding your team to the, full 20 plus spare change, well, for a lot of us, Mythic is just literally not an option because we're playing with our mates, and that's the way that we play the game. Whereas in the past, having what was called 10-man Heroic, which today we would call 10-man Mythic if it existed, that would be a good option for many. I don't know, what do you think? Do let me know down below. If Blizzard announced Mythic 10, I for one would be pretty hype, but I can understand the design problems there. Comparing to past expansions then, there is a continued downward trend in the end of expansion lows and the start of expansion highs for heroic guild participation within the first 28 days of the tier. But that being said, if we were to ignore the start of expansion outlier peaks seen for Uldir and Castle Nathria, then the 4-week figure for first boss kills in Vault of the Incarnates is looking, well, quite healthy when compared to all previous tiers since Legion. It may be ever so slightly lower than them, but it's still within a good range. The last boss kills figure, however, has continued to drop tier on tier since Antorus, with one outlier being Azothan BFA. So, while Vault was indeed an increase over Sepulchre, Sepulchre is a very special case because of how off its initial tuning was. If we discount Sepulchre, then Vault's last boss kill figure is still following that downward trend that we've seen since Antorus, which is not good. It seems as if, though, Blizzard are content enough to really have the end heroic boss feel like an early Mythic and have the, within the first 4 weeks, low kill count to match. Alright, let's go to Mythic then. Mythic does not follow the same trend. Oh, thank God, it was going to be such a boring video. Yes, so first boss kills, this is good news, they're back to Castle Nathria levels, increasing 126% over Sepulchre. And this is great news. Then last boss kills have increased by 400% back to Nathria levels. But it is only 14 kills. That's a small number, and, you know, that does mean that it's maybe not as statistically significant as the other numbers that we've had, which have been far larger. Now, obviously, Sepulchre was a special case in just how dismal the number of guilds that cleared that within 4 weeks were, so that second number would always be super high. Just all that would have to happen is a vaguely reasonably tuned boss versus how things were with J-Lore. But still, if first boss kills are a good indication of broad interest in engaging in the hardest form of raiding in World of Warcraft, then I think we can actually be happy here. Now, expanding this out to a few expansions, we do see that it's a good start, but by no means is it a return to form, so we still need the game to deliver the goods over time. Okay, let's talk about some other things then. We did love putting Mythic Plus numbers in for you, but honestly, all of our data sources are scuffed, right? And that does make it impossible to do a comparison that we would be content to present to you. The PvP numbers then, well, they are low enough. I mean, much like how Vault ended up being half of Nathria, you know, but by the time the numbers settled, they are indeed lower for PvP. I mean, 3v3 is barely breaking the 25k daily in EU, I think, either EU or US, you know, daily games a month into the season, while in Shadowlands, that same number was like 50%. I'm not too up to date in things. I know that Shadowlands at the start had an extremely high lethality meta that did lead to games being pretty darn quick in my own personal experience, which, I mean, I wouldn't count for much, but it is what everyone was saying. So you do look at this and you think, all right, well, yeah, there are fewer games, but there was a higher level of lethality, or a very high anyway level of lethality in the meta back then. So look, if you're a PvP player, I would love to see what your subjective experience has been like as relates to those numbers. So I suppose our numbers are basically closer to Season 3. But that being said, we have Solo Shuffle now rated, and it does seem to be quite a popular game mode. Maybe even in spite of those rough DPS queues. Now, if you combine that with PvP gearing that I think is significantly better, then maybe we do see things are actually going really in a good direction. So with PvP, it's hard to say, and I'd love to hear from you. Next then, Google Trends. Now, while Google Trends is not the most precise science in the universe, look, it does do a pretty good job of showing what it reports to show, interest over time. So, this 12-month graph covers what would usually be the end of expansion drought. Instead, actually, I think when you look at that interest over time, you see that Season 4 did a pretty good job of actually keeping the game a bit more alive for longer. Now, Dragonflight launch does have a spike, it ain't massive, and that's why I think we should view it in context. And oh boy, yeah, Dragonflight looks pretty small compared to BFA and Classic, which are our first two peaks in that graph. But here's what's fascinating. Dragonflight and Shadowlands Both peak at 63. Of course, Google will crunch that all into just like a sort of normalized number. So it's kind of interesting. You know, we're not half of classic launch, but it is what it is. I would say, though, that if we are matching general interest to Shadowlands, I mean, honestly, in some ways that does confuse me because it seems that we're having lower numbers than Shadowlands right now. Maybe that just represents fewer people feeling like they can commit to the game, but they're still keen to follow it because maybe they've heard people like me or Preach maybe talk about finding aspects of the game more enjoyable, but they haven't pulled the trigger yet. Maybe it's something like that. I suppose the question then is, how far will Dragonflight fall? And that's actually where I think Dragonflight could be strong. So there's two expansions I want to think about. One of them is MOP. Back in MOP, Blizzard were still actually giving us subscriber figures, and after the big loss, it actually stabilized and then went up for a bit off the back of just a really, really strong slate of content. Now, then if you look at our rating data from Legion, of course, you see some of those numbers go up. Now, 10.0.5 launches like 57 days after 10.0. 9.0.5, a patch that has significantly less than 10.05, launched like over 100 days after 9.0, which was rough. So I do think the patch cadence will keep this expansion in the public consciousness more. Now, turns out you can actually look at YouTube interest using Google Trends. Of course, Google owns YouTube. Yeah, well, that explains why we've been getting lower than normal views, doesn't it? I mean, there are still some videos that can break out, go a bit viral, and get really good views, but definitely you have to be more careful if you want high average views on YouTube these days. That's my experience of it. And this is really something I've known for ages. General interest in WoW is just down a bit. And you got to remember that line from Yoshi P about the kind of silent people are really the first people to leave, and you won't know about it. And I think while maybe you and I have been breaking our brains against the game for like 4 years, a lot of people just left quietly, you know? But that being said, the recent trend on YouTube is up, and that is good. So really my broad takeaway is everything here is representative of World of Warcraft sucking in a bunch of ways for ages. And now it no longer is that. I do think that Dragonflight is genuinely a fantastic expansion for the game, but I think it's just going to take time. Because Dragonflight, you know, it's designed to be something that will be fulfilling after Shadowlands. You know, it's the antithesis to Shadowlands in so many ways, especially tonally. But is it a big orc screaming freedom? No. And I think that probably got less general audiences hyped. Okay, finally then, one of the things that will feed into all of this is the state of the endgame. So, I just want to talk about the subjective things. So far, I love this tier. I actually think that 8 bosses is great. Yeah, I prefer 8 really good bosses to 10. I don't know what that means, but it's not like I'm sitting here saying, oh, I've got less content and I'm happy, but I don't know, maybe fewer but better is actually better. I mean, that doesn't seem too surprising. Yeah, I don't know. These are 8 awesome bosses. I mean, straight up, we have loved this raid. Then there's Razageth. And being real with you, like, I thought Anduin was an incredible fight. J-Lore, a bit less so. But, like, Anduin and Razageth, both sublime fights. And Razageth, I've really enjoyed. I think she's just incredible. Even in normal mode, I had a blast. Now, part of that is it's my first time ever healing. So, just kind of like learning all of that's been really fun. But now we are 5 out of 8 heroic, and we do raid like pretty casually. We just kind of have fun. But like getting to 5 out of 10 heroic, actually feeling a nice sense of progression through those bosses, it's been a super satisfying experience. So subjectively, my bunch are all super happy. Seriously, it is just hard to overstate how good raiding has felt. So overall then, World of Warcraft has struggled, it's lost a lot of people, and even though I've been loving Dragonflight, that's always because I was A, willing to give it a chance, and B, still had the state of WoW within my general sphere of interest. But for more casual fans of the game who just wandered off, maybe played PoE or Destiny, well, it's not a case of them deciding the new expansion is good, because they're not even thinking about World of Warcraft in the first place. And that means that Blizzard has got to engage them and earn their interest by, well, A, delivering excellent content over the next few years so that they can have strong social proof from the player base, and then B, having an expansion concept that truly gets people extremely excited in the same way that Warlords of Draenor and Legion were able to do. Dragonflight isn't explosively exciting. It is a grower, but at least from my perspective, it seems like it's exactly what World of Warcraft needs at this stage. So, that's the numbers. That's my understanding. Let me know what you think about them. If you'd like to check out a truly awesome lore video, then check this one out. And also, be sure to support today's sponsor because it really does help us out. All right, have a good one.